Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming out this morning. I'm joined by Chief Todd Axtell and Colonel Langer from the State Patrol. This has been a very, very long evening and early morning in the city of St. Paul. As many of you have seen from the footage, we had an extreme incident last night following what has been several days of peaceful protest in the city of St. Paul following a shooting that occurred in Falcon Heights. We know that as a capital city that even though the shooting didn't occur in the city of St. Paul, we do understand that as the capital city that people will come here to exercise their First Amendment rights, and we have always tried to accommodate that exercise of their rights. For the last several days we have been able to do so very successfully. People have gathered in front of the governor's mansion or governor's residence. People have had vigils, marched between J.J. Hill Montessori School, the governor's residence. They have been supported and protected by the police department, and that has always been our policy, whether it was the incidents around the Twin Cities Marathon, whether it was Martin Luther King Day protests, crashed ice, etc. We have always had opportunities for people to protest and to do so, and they have worked hand in glove with our police department. Unfortunately, last night, some of the individuals that had gathered at the governor's residence decided to go from peaceful protest and exercise of their First Amendment rights to rioting. We have always said that we will draw the line between inconvenience and endangerment. And last night, the actions of some protesters turned into endangering the lives of others, whether that was the protesters themselves, the children that were on the scene, those that needed to get back and forth in the city of St. Paul and through an ambulance or other emergency vehicles, and most particularly our officers. Last night the city of St. Paul and the St. Paul Police Department was assisted by many agencies. I'll let the chief and the colonel talk a little bit more specifics about some of the things that happened last night. And unfortunately, many of those officers that responded to that scene were subject to rocks, to rebar, to explosive devices, to Molotov cocktails being thrown at them. And many of those officers were injured. Thankfully, while some of those injuries were significant, none of them are life-threatening. Last night, I want to say that I have never been prouder of the St. Paul Police Department. Into the early hours this morning, they acted with extreme professionalism, extreme patience, extreme tolerance, trying to continue to protect the ability of people to peacefully protest, but drawing the line when peaceful acts of protest turn into acts of violence. We will not tolerate this in the city of St. Paul. What happened last night and early this morning does a disservice to those that have lost their lives this last week, whether it was Philandro Castillo in Falcon Heights or the officers in Dallas. This is not about grief. This is not about protest. This is about rioting. This is about violence. Our officers worked extremely hard last night to calm things down. We will continue to do that. We understand we have that responsibility as a capital city, but we will not tolerate the kind of shameful violence that we saw throughout the course of the night. This doesn't honor anyone's memory. This does a disservice to those, including the officers in Dallas that lost their lives, including Philandro Castillo. So I'll turn it over at this time to Chief Axtell and for more specifics, and then to Colonel Langer, and then we'll stand for questions. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to say, I'd like to pass this around so the media can see this badge. You'll see on this badge how sturdy, symbolic it is. And as you look at the top of the badge, you can't really see it at a distance, but I want you to touch this badge and see the significant impact of a rock like this that gets thrown from a bridge and hits one of our officers with enough force to crack helmets and bend a piece of solid steel like this. So I'd like you to feel that, to show you just a little example of what our officers were faced with last night. As the mayor said, the city of St. Paul, the St. Paul Police Department has a long, strong, and proud history and tradition of allowing peaceful protesters their First Amendment rights in our city. whether that was the Twin Cities Marathon or the State Fair protests, we have proven that we have the recipe in doing it the St. Paul way. However, last night really was the first time in my 28 years as a police officer that I have observed the level of violence that was directed towards our public servants, the public servants that are there to protect all of us in this room and all of us in our community. And it's really a disgrace. And protesters last night turned into criminals, and I'm absolutely disgusted by the acts of some, not all, but some. We're not going to tolerate it. We will continue the strong tradition of allowing peaceful protesters to do just that. We'll facilitate safe movement. But again, I want to reiterate to those that want to come into this city and jeopardize our public safety and assault our officers, we're not going to tolerate it. So that'll be our approach moving forward. We had 21 police officers last night that were injured as a result of rocks, bottles, rebar, Molotov cocktails, and other items that were thrown at our public servants. And it's, I just can't believe that this occurred. This is something that just doesn't happen in St. Paul. So as we move forward, we need to make sure that we allow peaceful protests, but also I want everybody to take a moment to understand that the sacrifice and the commitment by our police officers is incredible, and they should be thanked for their service. And as the Chief of Police in St. Paul, I'm incredibly proud of our officers. They worked hard last night. They're exhausted. Some of them are going home now to get some rest. Their families are worried. And we're going to come back and start all over again tonight. And we're hoping and praying that tonight's a better night. And that will be in the hands of those who committed this violence in our city tonight. We wish that they'll have a different approach tonight, but our approach won't be any different. We're going to continue to be reasonable, necessary, and serve with respect every step of the way. Thank you very much. Colonel?
Good morning, everyone. For the record, Matt Langer, Chief of the Minnesota State Patrol. I don't intend on duplicating the comments of the mayor and the chief, but just to give everyone a little bit of context, last night about 7:30, we got information that the protest group had left the governor's residence on Summit Avenue and had started making their way toward the freeway. Our longstanding message has been that there are many places that people can gather and protest and demonstrate and exercise their First Amendment rights, but the freeway is not one of those places. Closing freeways endangers the people that are on the freeway and endangers the motoring public. It prevents emergency services from occurring, and it prevents people from doing their jobs and taking care of business in the state of Minnesota by those freeways being closed. Being on the freeway is illegal. It's illegal always to be there on foot, including for these protest events. So we do the best we can to prevent protests from getting onto the freeway. Most of the time we've been very successful in working with groups and being in our preventative efforts from keeping that from occurring. Last night we weren't able to do that, and thankfully with the assistance of the St. Paul Police Department and many other agencies, we were able to take care of business and ultimately ended up making 50 arrests on the freeway. We'll be getting out the public information on those arrests later, but what we know right now is that 50 people were arrested, and I won't duplicate too many of the comments other than to say that we had about 100 troopers respond and work hand in hand with St. Paul Police Department and many other agencies. And those troopers, like you've heard in the media and you've read and you've seen and observed, those troopers and those officers that were out there went right into harm's way. And it was very difficult to watch and make decisions to put them in harm's way, knowing that they were being pelted and assaulted and thrown with rocks and rebar and the other items that you've seen. 6 troopers suffered minor injuries, blows from rocks and rebar and explosive devices. They operated with incredible restraint and the professionalism that I think is consistent with our history since 1929. We are committed to making sure that folks that are out at the residence on Summit Avenue continue to have their ability to protest. and to do so peacefully. We've had no problems there whatsoever, and we look forward to no problems again as we move forward and get past tonight and sort out exactly what happened by finishing the reports and making sure that those that were out there are successfully charged and held accountable for their behavior last night.
Questions?
Can you clarify, I'm sorry, I'm bringing yours to CNN. Can you clarify, you 6 troopers and 21 police officers, so is it 27 or is it 21 as a whole?
It's 21 total.
21.
21 total law enforcement personnel.
Okay.
Yep.
And were there 2 separate protests that both originated at the governor's office or mansion, or did one shift from the freeway down to where, just a few blocks from the governor's mansion?
Sure. The earlier one was the one that ended up on the freeway, and those were the 52 arrests were made. And then after that, some of the protesters went back to the governor's mansion on Summit Avenue, and a few of those, approximately 52, broke away and decided to march down to Grand Avenue over to Dale. And those are the some of the items that we recovered from those protesters include these two rocks and another badge that I'll pass around. As you can see, one of the rocks actually hit the officer's badge and actually scraped off the entire front of the badge. I'll pass that around so you can see that as well. The difference is with the second group, officers formed a skirmish line, surrounded them because we heard they were going to go to the freeway again, and we didn't want another incident like occurred on the freeway. So they complied, and arrests were made with absolutely no force because they chose to follow a lawful order, and we were happy about that.
But all of those people that sort of moved in the SWAT members, all those people, sorry.
Yeah,
All those
yeah, I know.
people were arrested, correct?
On the second run, yes, 52 people were arrested. That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Other questions?
Desiree Murphy with CCOTDA. Can you just kind of clarify, Colonel Langer said that 50 people were arrested on the freeway. There are obviously people arrested at the Grand Avenue location. Would the total number of arrests 50?
102
102, I'm sorry. 102.
with at the 2 locations.
Okay, so it was how many on the freeway?
50.
Okay, then,
52 on Grand Avenue.
okay. Can you describe the nature of the officers' injuries? Are any of them hospitalized?
Yeah, at least 3 St. Paul police officers were seen at Regions. One has a dislocated shoulder. Another officer had scrapes, bumps, bruises, and a gouge on his arm. And another one is getting looked at right now. So we don't know the extent of those injuries, but it's certainly not life-threatening, but they're significant enough to go to the hospital.
The 102 people arrested, are they all still in custody?
The arrests from the State Patrol that we assisted on the freeway, they are in custody. Those 50 are in custody. The 52 from Grand Avenue was a less of a charge, so they were tagged and released.
Even photo at ABC News, can you explain when this protest got out of control? And with something like a Molotov cocktail being thrown, I mean, it's pretty amazing that no officers were hurt more in that situation.
Yeah, approximately 9 p.m. is when the mood really changed from being a protest to a riot. Fortunately, the 2 Molotov cocktails that were thrown onto the freeway were lit, but then they died out before they exploded onto the freeway. So thankfully, the officers weren't hit as a result of that. But there were large fireworks that were thrown into our officers that exploded, and we have officers with ringing of their ears, and those obviously can be very dangerous to all of our public.
So did it get out of control once it got onto the freeway, or did that start to happen prior to getting down there?
No, it got out of control after they occupied the freeway, and the tone started to change. And our officers started to be threatened by some of the protesters, and that's what started ramping things up. Officers started to take rocks, bottles, and debris, and then we had to take appropriate action at that time.
For people at home who haven't seen these officers at the protest, can you describe, were they in riot gear prepared for this type of situation?
They had helmets on, and they had their gas masks with them. They weren't put on immediately because we had no reason to put them on right away. So they had protective gear, but they weren't in the traditional turtle suits that sometimes you see where they are all geared up. They put their helmets on and their other duty gear like I'm wearing right now.
What are the potential charges, what are these people being told on, and are they all in your jail?
Yeah, I'll let the colonel talk about the charges from the more serious charges.
I can talk about the 50 that were arrested on the freeway. So we were in the Emergency Operations Center observing everything that was occurring up until the point that arrests were made. And the St. Paul City Attorney has a representative in that office, and it was a conversation that resulted in the decision to book those 50 on third-degree riot charges.
Sean Skinner, WCCO TV. What's the timeline between the first 50 arrested and then the second 52? When was the second 52? When were they arrested? How late into the morning?
I could look at the, what time?
4 a.m.
Approximately 4 a.m. Final, yeah.
Can you talk about what you guys have to do in order to sort of control,
sorry, Carl.
this mace use was sort of flash grenades and
Sure. As our officers were being assaulted, we deployed inert gas. And it's not a gas; it's a smoke. It's not mace-based. It's not tear gas. It's just smoke, and there's no irritants in it. We do that to stop the threat coming on officers, and also inert blast balls. There are two types of blast balls. One that shoots out projectiles to keep people back, and then an inert blast ball that is just a flash and a loud bang to keep people back. Those two things were used, and then later, as we had people that were up on the side and we were still taking rocks and bottles and other items, some of the spray mace was used on a few of the people assaulting officers.
Al Shock, WCCO Radio, how long was the interstate closed, from what time until what time?
The exact length of that, I am not entirely sure right now. It was certainly several hours.
Cleo Green, ABC. In the case of Jamar Clark, we saw that they were staged in front of the 4th Precinct for weeks. In terms of the governor's residence, is there any plan of action of when that might be cleared up or when they're going to be asked to leave?
Yeah, that's going to be a day-by-day decision based on what's in the best interest of our city and our community.
Well, the 50 who are being held, are they going to be held pending the actual filing of formal charges, or is there a possibility of release?
I don't want to provide misinformation, so I'd probably refer that question to the city attorney's office.
How did they get on the freeway? Because there were pictures posted on social media. It looked like the State Patrol attempted to block them at Lexington. Is that the case, and were you prepared enough to handle what most people thought could happen? Because this has happened a few times in the past year.
We did do our best to prevent the group from getting on the freeway, and unfortunately, it didn't work. This group was different than other groups that we've dealt with. We've had experience with this over the last 18 months. We've had great experience with prevention, and we've also experienced on 2 other occasions where groups have gotten on the freeway. And our experience last night was 180 degrees from those other 2 experiences. We haven't been assaulted. The other groups have been peaceful. They've carried out their First Amendment right. They've been vocal. They've had emotion, but they haven't had, they just haven't had the assaultive behaviors that we experienced last night. And that was evident rather quickly after the negotiations that were occurring started to kind of fizzle. Because I don't know if we should make that clear that St. Paul officers and state troopers worked incredibly hard to talk with the group for a significant period of time to provide our message that you need to move along, you need to get off the freeway. And that just didn't go anywhere despite the valiant attempts by St. Paul officers and troopers. And so this group was entirely different than what we've experienced in the past.
Given what has happened in the past week, especially here about the nights in Louisiana, obviously in Dallas, what was the mindset? Were officers and troopers briefed ahead of time? And what was sort of, I would think there had to have been added tensions and concerns going into this situation.
I can speak for the State Patrol. We didn't brief any differently. Sometimes I have a hard time articulating just the extreme courage that it takes, because there wasn't a state trooper that expressed concern for being there. They were there to do their job, and to do their job as they're trained and as we hire them to do it with our core values of respect, integrity, courage, honor, and excellence at the forefront. And that's exactly what they did.
Sure. Our, obviously, officers are human, so we have emotions about when law enforcement officers and community members are killed throughout the country. And that affects us on a personal level, but it never affects us on a professional level because that's what we can't do. So we always approach these situations the same, and that is our actions are reasonable, necessary, and done with respect. We prepare the same. We always hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And unfortunately, last night, the worst occurred.
So the 50 on the freeway were charged, or third-degree riot charges? And what about the 52? What's the charges there?
52 on Grand Avenue, we have 2 charges for unlawful assembly and public nuisance. Those are misdemeanor charges.
Any of the protesters get hurt?
No.
Mayor Godfrey with the Pioneer Press. I wanted to ask the mayor, where were you? Were you at the command center during the protest, and were you providing direction and instruction on how the city should be responding?
I got to the command center early in the morning. I was in constant contact from the time that this incident began, particularly as it started to move onto the freeway. I take the position that I have some of the best and highest trained professional law enforcement officials. I certainly am in consultation and have some expectations, but at the end of the day, the chief gets to make those calls, and his command staff. I have to say, I was listening to the audio of a lot of what was transpiring last night, and I just want to single out Commander Frazier because throughout the course of that incident, I have never heard anyone so in command and so calm throughout what was a very, very difficult moment. And so certainly the chief and I and others are consulting, but at the end of the day, it's law enforcement's called to make the determination as what the best tactics are.
Fox 9, question about the children that were moved into a van, and then there was some reports and some video of people telling our cameras that the children were maced or people. Can you explain or share some details about what exactly went on?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I want to clarify that. First of all, I want to say that we gave over 25 announcements before we took action last night. 25 plus announcements. There was a bit of a cat and mouse game going on between promises, many promises that were made to our command staff on scene saying, give us another 10 minutes, just give us 15 minutes. Those time lapses continued to be false promises. We continued to be restrained. We continued to be patient like we do in St. Paul. And one of the things was we wanted that vehicle to get off the off-ramp because there were children in it. And our officers always are instructed to, and they do as just a course of their duties, making sure we assess the group to make sure there's no children in place. So we knew there were children there. We actually, as we were taking rocks and bottles, our officers moved their skirmish line behind that truck so it could be pushed off the ramp before we took the action that we did last night. So we took every possible step to make sure children weren't involved in this incident last night. And for the life of me, I can't understand why you would put a child into that position in the first place. It's really disgusting if you ask me.
Approximately how many children were in this truck? Can you share that? And how many were exposed to the pepper spray or at least?
No, there were no children in that truck exposed. There were some people around that truck as we moved the skirmish line forward that there was a level of force used because they weren't allowing our officers to get in front of that truck to protect those children. So once we did that, we got those children to safety.
I want to reiterate on that point. The shamelessness of someone that would bring children and use them as shields into a situation like that is absolutely outrageous. And I think it speaks to the depravity of some of the individuals that we saw out there. These are not peaceful protesters. These are not the people that want to have their First Amendment rights. They were there to cause trouble, and the fact that they would bring children to this thing is absolutely outrageous. I don't know how anyone with a conscience could do something like that. Our officers handled that situation extremely well, as the chief has outlined, but that is just absolutely unacceptable.
How many officers all told were involved? Because at one point, I think there was a call from maternal aid, wasn't there not?
Yeah, we had at the end, well in excess of 200 officers out there.
Including state patrol.
Are you aware of any planned protests tonight or today? Other than that mention?
Just at the mansion in St. Paul.
And how long will those, the protests around the mansion be allowed to continue indefinitely?
Yeah, as I said earlier, it's just going to be a day-by-day decision based on what's in the best interest of public safety in our community as a whole.
We have time for probably 2 more questions. In terms of officer helping, I spoke to an officer from Mankato, in terms of the help, who's here?
Who is here?
We're doing rotating shifts.
Can you just restate that one more time?
Mankato, I spoke to an officer from Mankato, so I'm just wondering, is it just St. Paul police officers that are dealing with protesters, or is this really an effort from Minneapolis and?
Well, everybody's dealing with protests across the country right now, as we're seeing. So that's a common occurrence that we're dealing with. But we really, as a law enforcement community, even though we have our specific jurisdictions, we really always step up to the plate and help each other when it's needed. And last night we really had a lot of support, so it was great to see.
Can you list what was used? Was mace used? Was tear gas used? Smoke, bullets?
We used smoke. That's not tear gas. We used some mace at the end to get people off the grassy hill as they continued to throw rocks and bottles at our officers. And that's the level of force we used last night.
Great, thank you.